All right. Good afternoon, people. Thanks for getting together this afternoon. Um, I think this conversation or concepts came out of DemoComp, where we get to show off great student projects. And, obviously there's a vast pool of alumni out there and made us say, like, what if there was a space for alumni to share a little bit of knowledge or show something they're working on or whatever, just hang out, connect a little bit, like almost like a little Turing meetup. And so decided to put together this event today as an experiment. So thank you for coming and showing us that people will be curious to check it out. Here's how we want to do things today. And I will say, if you know me, it means like remixing on the fly. So like 2 minutes ago, I was like, hey, Laura, how about if we do it like this? So Laura's going to be our MC, running some slides and videos and pieces like that, making sure those things work well. Um, I'm going to ask some questions and referee some audience questions and so forth if folks have those. And for overall format, we have four presentations today. So how I want to do it is we're going to do one questions, second one questions, and then I'm going to make us some little breakout rooms because I didn't think it'd be that fun if you aren't presenting. And let's say you just came, you sit in silence the whole time, and then at the end you're like, I'm out. That doesn't sound that fun. So I thought, okay, we'll do two presentations, and then we're going to do a little breakout room. Wrote up a couple questions for you to discuss. Going to be shoot for about four people or so in the breakout room. Do that for approximately 10 minutes, 12 minutes, and then come back together, do the final two presentations. And then afterwards, if speakers are available, we're going to set up some breakout rooms for them if they're up for having any other follow-up questions or small group chit chat. And then we'll get out of here. So I think the whole thing take us less than an hour tonight. So good little prototype. As always in Turing Life, get in the chat. If you've got some questions, you've got some unrelated nonsense, you got some commentary on Laura's opening music, and you, like me, were wondering, was Laura alive when Gangsta's Paradise came out? I think it was not. I think that's a no. But I remember those days. Maybe you missed that if you weren't here early. Anyway, we're gonna get into it. Laura, who is up first?
I cannot unmute myself. We have got Jesse, who's going to be showing us his app slash company, domath.io. Jesse is going to be presenting live, so I'm actually going to stop screen sharing right now and pass the screen share off to Jesse.
I'm not familiar. Jesse, you say you're an alum? What's your deal?
Yeah, I
Who are
used to.
you?
I've been a attorney before. So Laura, thanks for inviting me, and Jeff, thanks for inviting me and organizing this. This is awesome. And thanks to everybody who's here joining. It's been fun for me to like build this thing on the side, and so I'm excited to hear what you all think. So let me introduce myself. I'm Jesse Spivak, he/him pronouns. I'm a backend 1606 alum, and I'm a software engineer at a company called Stripe. And now I'd like to introduce my chief product officer and co-presenter. Go ahead, go ahead.
Audrey Mary Spivak.
Okay, so Audrey is
8 years old and is in second grade and has a twin brother, Eddie, which is we're 6 months old when I started at Turing.
so when I started at Turing, Audrey was 6 months old. Audrey and her twin brother were 6 months old. So now she has become my chief product officer for domath.io. And the story here is that when they were a few years ago, my wife bought a set of flashcards on Amazon to help our kids learn math facts. And they were beautiful and they were kind of expensive. They were like $50 for these cards. And I was flipping the cards with my kids to try to teach them try to give him practice. And basically I thought, Daddy does not flip flashcards. I can make an app to do this. And so I thought, hey, let's put something together. And I've gone through a couple iterations. So what I want to do is kind of show what this app is, and then Audrey will kind of show you how to play it. So the first thing that we have is just kind of this landing page, which I'm pretty happy with. And when you log in, we use a magic link, which I hand rolled, which was super fun. I'm gonna spare you that. But from there, it actually, once you log in with the magic link, it's going to take you to a Stripe checkout form, or the opportunity to use a Stripe checkout form. And I've integrated this with Stripe. And I'm happy to talk more about that. It's kind of like an OAuth flow, where you go from this site to Stripe, and then Stripe handles the credit card information, and then you can gain access to the game. So I've set up a blank account here, and I've got a player, and my first player is Audrey. So Audrey's going to show you how she plays the game. We have it set up on her iPad, which we can talk more about. But Audrey, why don't you take it away and show people how we play this game? I'm gonna. Yeah.
Okay, so you can see there's 3 plus 2, and that is 5. So I click the number 5. And then if I feel good about my answer, I would click the checkbox. And if you got it right, you could hear a little ding. And then let's say,
as you're thinking about that, the ding is really helpful because I can be in another room and listen for the ding to make sure that math is happening. Go ahead.
and then let's say I accidentally clicked the wrong number. So 2 plus 2 is 4. So let's say that is 5. I accidentally clicked 5. And I'm like, no, that's the wrong thing. No stress. You have the Xbox. You will click that so that you can click the number that you actually want, which is 4. And then you would click the checkbox. And it would ding, usually.
Show them. Why don't you show them the very bottom so they can see the progress
Okay,
bar
and then here's the bottom progress bar.
to get to the next level.
Okay, so I'll show you that. So 1 plus 1 is 2. 2 plus 0 is 2. 5 plus 0 is...
Let's pause there for a second. And I want to show one last thing. So while Audrey's been playing, the app has been keeping track of what she's doing. And so I can see she's solved 5 problems. She's got a 1-day streak going on. And these are the problems in green that she's proficient at that we're not going to keep showing her. If she had gotten any of these wrong, they'd turn red, and they'd be things that'd be prioritized by the problem selection algorithm. And once all these bubbles turn green, she levels up and unlocks a new set of problems. This goes all the way up through addition, subtraction, multiplication. And yeah, that's DoMath.io, and appreciate everybody tuning in. Yeah, you can say.
And let me just do one more thing. If you get it wrong, 1 plus 0 is actually 1, but let's say it's 2. And I click the checkbox. It will show try again with a little strong mark so that you can do this.
Yeah, we've gamified this through a lot of iterating. So I don't know if there's time for questions. I don't know.
Yeah, there's time. I got a lot of questions.
All right.
Okay.
All
Okay.
right.
My
Bring
first
me
question.
back to my first demo comp, Jeff.
Yeah, exactly. My first question is, Audrey, how did you win the competition to have this job over your brother? How come he didn't get the job?
Okay, so my brother Eddie does not like to like act in front of like a lot of people, and I do because I perform on stage and in ballet shows. I perform on stage during piano concerts. So that's why I'm like, oh, can I do this?
Yeah.
Can we
So
have some
old,
more, technical questions?
yeah. I mean, I'm sure you still have a purpose, Jesse. Don't worry. As old people, we would say it's like it's not your first rodeo. You've been on stage here before. Okay, so I appreciate that. Curious, Audrey, like when if you remember like old versions of the software when your dad first showed it to you, and I'm sure it was terrible. What were some of the changes that you suggested he make through, when you put him back to work? What were some of the most important things that you were like, no, this is not correct?
Okay, so one of the things, every time I clicked a button, it would not click. So I had to go like,
Oh.
and then it would finally click. I was like, Dad, please, can you make it so one click, it's on, instead of like. So that's one of the things. Let's see. Another is like, I think it was like to tell you if we were wrong or not, because I think it was like, it would show you at the end which ones you got right or wrong.
Early on, there was no chance to retry, so you get it wrong and it would just move on, and that was very frustrating.
And Jesse, can you speak to us at all about the technical side of like how you implemented it, what kind of tools you're using, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so this is straight Rails, baby. When I get paid to write software, I do it in whatever stack people tell me to write it in. But when I get to do it myself, I choose Ruby on Rails. And so this is straight Rails. There's very little JavaScript involved. And the JavaScript that's there is stimulus. Yeah, I think in general, I guess there's maybe two things to call out. One is I use sorbet because I'm insane. Sorbet is a type makes it so Ruby is a typed language, and it just helps me not confuse myself. So that's one thing. Another thing that's worth calling out, I think, is in general my approach was like, the most complicated thing here is the algorithm for selecting the next problem. And I, as much as possible, have forced the database to do the work there. And that's required a lot of iterating on how I model the responses and the problems in the database. So the lesson that I've drawn is like, when the algorithm gets really hard, it's because my data model is not right. And I don't want to have to like, in my free time, like do hard things. And so that forced me to do some redesigning.
And then I could ask you like an hour of questions here, but I'll let you off the hook eventually. Obviously, as you said, back in 2016, you used to build some little Rails apps, and then was that the year 2016?
Yeah.
That was a long time ago. And so since then, you've been working on a lot of other people's software. When you come back to working on your own software, like what lessons do you take from that professional world? Are you like, I'm going to do things just like I do them at work, and I'm going to have boards and stories and estimates and sprint tracking and all that stuff? Or you're like, I'm doing zero of that. I'm going to just like write some code and see what happens.
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think honestly, to some extent, like the work stuff, the work stuff actually makes you more, like, in some ways more effective. And like some of the stuff is complicated enough where I need that work stuff to actually get it to work. It's not something that I can like, I don't know. I think about it like when I'm doing something really rigorous, like I might try to like have not do it 100%. And if I had just go in knowing that I need to do 100% and being really serious and rigorous about it, I end up that, like, if I make that choice, then it ends up taking less time than doing it an easy way, but then having to redo it a more rigorous way. So I threw in my repo in the Zoom chat so you guys can all see my code and some of the good decisions I've made and some of the interesting decisions I've made. And yeah, just stoked to get to share this with everyone, and very, very proud of my chief product officer. This has been something that Audrey and I have been looking forward to for a few weeks. So thank you all.
Yeah, nice. If anybody else has questions, like maybe throw them in the chat. But I'll just ask one more, which is like, what do you see in your like optimistic, realistic future? You know, is it something where you say, all right, over the next 6 months, I want to keep chipping away at this problem and like use it as something for us to, you know, learn and kind of like build your parent-child relationship, et cetera? Do you see it as like, well, maybe I could turn this into something that somebody's gonna pay money for or whatever?
Yeah, so I'm hoping that people will pay money for this. I've been a little afraid to throw this in the parent Turing channel, just because of my own insecurity and imposter syndrome. But definitely open to feedback on this. I feel like, you know, I have if you go through the payment options, you'll see it's a pay what you want model, which is, I think, interesting. So it's kind of like, lets me gauge the market. Would people actually pay for this, or and then what would be the price that they'd be willing to pay? So that's kind of how I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, I love it. It's interesting with, you know, one of the challenges, I went to a George W. Bush speech. No, George W., not George H.W. George W. Bush speech. And I got out of it. This is when I was teaching his education speech. I got out and I said to a friend of mine, I was like, that was not bad. Like, I kind of see how somebody could vote for this guy. And a friend said, like, yeah, that's because nobody boos education. And it's something I've always like kept in mind in some of these spaces. And I think it's interesting when you consider anything like ed tech, ed policy, et cetera, is nobody goes like, nah, kids don't need to learn math. Right. And it can be a bit of a harsh reality. I mean, I think you know better than most, right? But like, it is hard to get people to pay money for things. And when people see it, they're like, I would totally pay for that. And then you're like, okay, here's the link. They're like, well, I mean, not today, you know, but like maybe tomorrow I'll pay a couple dollars for that. So
yeah,
it's super
great when you do like 6 months of development work. And then you're like, I got that link. Remember you told me you're going to pay for this?
Yeah, absolutely. It can be a crash back to earth. Well, thank you, Audrey. And also thank you, Audrey, for allowing your dad to co-star in your show. And we look forward to your future performances.
Save a spot for her in, I guess, like 28, 20, I don't know. I can't do the math in my head.
We got spots in July, you know?
Okay.
We can figure it out. Just get on you don't even need that much math. You'll probably be good. We'll figure it out. Thank you, Spivax.
Thank you.
And second up, we got, thank you, Dan. We got a little cheers. Second up, we've got Anna, and I'm gonna remember how to do this here. Anna, you ready for us?
You know, and I will stop screen sharing.
All right.
I feel set up, to be honest.
That's why I asked some questions. So they're like, at least Anna's better than Jeff talking.
Okay, let me share. So I'm going to chat about networking. Hold on one second. Let's keynote. Okay, everything changed on my screen. Thanks, Zoom. Okay, cool. So I'm doing a 5-minute lightning talk. I'm going to try my best to keep it at 5 minutes. It is 4:55 my time now, so I'm going to start the clock there. Hi, I'm Anna. I'm a 2107 front-end alum, and I'm a current software engineer at Heroku. And today I'm here to eradicate your fears of networking and turning what is typically nightmare fuel into your favorite tool. And so here we go. Why is networking important? Really, networking builds momentum around your career. It fosters more opportunities, more support, more experiences, and therefore you can achieve your professional goals a lot faster if you know how to effectively network and build authentic and genuine connections. And so that's what we're going to talk about. One of the biggest questions I get is who makes a good connection? Who should I connect with when I'm talking with people who are looking for a job, who are thinking about changing fields, who are finishing school, finishing Turing? They're like, who the heck should I talk to? Really, my answer is kind of twofold. One is people who are community builders for you. Those are going to be people that support you and help you see other perspectives, have a lot of empathy for the journey that you're on. And those will be people that are doing the same thing you're doing right now. And then people who have been where you are. So it doesn't matter if you're in a job, if you're unemployed, wherever you are, find people that are in the same boat, connect with them and build relationships. They're going to be a great support system for you throughout your professional journey. And then the other group of people is like network builders. And those are going to be people that are doing the job that you want. They're doing it right now. And then also people who are doing the job that maybe you want in like 5 years. And those people are going to be great to connect with because they will increase your network. Odds are, if they're doing the job you want or the job you want in 5 years, they've grown their network with the type of people that they work with. And so you're going to be expanding your own network by connecting with those people. Okay, so now that we know who's good to connect with, how do you get time on their calendar? I'm so sorry, but I am going to say LinkedIn Premium is a great way to do this. I know it's sucks and it's expensive, but it's necessary in today's job market. So LinkedIn InMail, DMs, and connections are fantastic ways to connect with people. There are also hundreds and hundreds of Slack communities. Join those and DM people. So now you know how to contact them. What do you say when you're contacting them? Lean into excitement about getting to know them. People love to talk about themselves. And so if you say, I'd love to hear about your journey, I'd love to hear about you, include very specific things. These are going to be great ways that entice them into continuing a conversation with you. Things not to do, don't ask for a job. Don't take an apathetic approach of saying like, I got laid off and I'm having a hard time. Those are not really things that are enticing to people. So lean into your grit and your excitement about what lies ahead. And that's how you're going to get people to really respond to you. All right. So you know who you connected with. You got time on their calendar. Now, what the heck do you even say once you're staring at them? Again, I already said it. People love to talk about themselves. So ask them questions about themselves and their journey. The best part of this is a scenario where you can do 90% of the listening and only 10% of the talking. I'd love to hear about where you got where you are, how you got where you are right now. What do you love about your role? What is your day-to-day like? What do you think makes a great fill in the blank role? And then another one of my favorite questions is, who do you think is killing it right now? This could be a team, a company, a person, but this question is kind of a sneaky way to say, like, what are your values? What are the things that you care about? They're going to tell you by answering this question. And look, I'm at 5 minutes, so thank you. That was incredibly fast. I don't know how that was 5 minutes. You might have more questions than you had answers to start with, and I'll be around for Q&A. And that I'm gonna stop sharing now.
All right, Anna, I got questions.
Portion.
Back in the day, let's say 2019, if you talk to a software developer and you're like, hey, do you use LinkedIn? They would have said to you like, oh, LinkedIn, so annoying. There's just all these recruiters and they're always messaging me about have this job, and I don't have time for all that, so I don't use LinkedIn. Now come around 2022, 2023, maybe into 2024, all of a sudden the same people are like, there's no jobs, I can't get a job, no one will speak to me, et cetera, right? It turns out that like, your professional network like kind of matters. How, like, should you, when you're job hunting, it makes sense that you're trying to reach out to people, you're trying to have these conversations, et cetera. What do you think it looks like when somebody's not job hunting? Slash, should you always be job hunting?
Yeah, you should. You should always be job hunting. No one has a crystal ball. Things can change, and to quote my favorite drag queen, RuPaul, you don't have to get ready if you stay ready. And so you always want to be ready for when things change. And we're in a market right now that jobs are not really listed. They're going to referrals. They're going to people that the team members know. And so you want to be, even if you just accepted a job yesterday, you're still networking. You're still building your network.
Okay. Now, sometimes, Anna, I tell people stuff and they don't listen, or they're like, yeah, old guy, just shut up, whatever. And then when you say it, they're like, whoa, what? That's amazing. Thank you for this brand new take. You're saying that jobs aren't listed? How could people get a job if it's not listed? What does that even mean?
Yeah, I'm currently 2 for 2 in jobs post Turing that I accepted that were never listed.
Now you're working at Heroku, owned by Salesforce, hundreds of thousands of employees. It's not like a fly by night startup.
No.
You're telling me they're just like, hey, Anna, come get this job.
Yeah, I made a post on LinkedIn that shared about myself. Actually, both of my jobs post Turing came from me sharing on LinkedIn about taking a next step and looking for a role. And principal engineer on my current team messaged me, who happened to be a connection of a connection, and said, hey, do you want to work at Heroku? And I was like, are you shitting me? Yeah, I do. And he was like, do you want to work in Elixir? And I was like, literally, that's on my dream job board right now. And it was never posted. And they hired 4 people, and not one job was posted.
There it is.
There it is.
When people reach out to you on LinkedIn, in other channels, etc. Now you're a mom, yeah. You don't have infinite time. You got a job, etc. You can't follow up with everybody. Maybe you can because you're like on it. But okay, when are the times where you're like, yeah, I'll get back to them sooner or later? And when are the times that you're like, you know what? Okay, this person, like, this is a thing right now. Like, what makes you decide whether you're gonna engage like quickly, or when are you engage? Are you like, nah, or are you like, oh, this is a chore?
Yeah. If someone is like, hey, I noticed you like dogs and I also like dogs, I'm gonna message you back immediately.
Yeah, okay, I love it.
but that goes to say, like, if I can tell someone put time and effort into saying like, hey, I'm seeing this person on LinkedIn, they're doing a job that I think I'm interested in, that I want to do. I see that they are interested in these things. I'm going to reach out to them. I'm going to provide some very like specific background as to why I'm reaching out, and see if they would like to connect. I will always respond pretty quickly. If you reach out to me and say, hey, I got laid off, I see you're at Heroku, are you guys hiring? I'm probably not gonna be very quick. I feel for you. I feel that you were laid off, or that you're looking for a job, because that's a tough thing to be going through. But that is also an incredibly apathetic approach that doesn't tell me a lot about who you are and what it would be like to work with you. And that's kind of like the fold you want to break through, right?
Yeah, I love it. You know, I mean, I think I'm sure everybody on the call and so forth, it's like being unemployed sucks and job hunting sucks, and trying to network when you know you're in a spot of like desperation and so forth is really hard. And what I hear you saying, right, is like there's a lot of value. You want to see somebody like put in a little something extra.
Mhm.
Right. And when somebody messages you and you're like, hey, you're at Heroku, I'd also like to be at Heroku, what's up? It's kind of like, it's just not enough to make me say, you know, like, yeah, lots of people want to work at Heroku.
Yeah.
And when instead somebody's like, hey, you know, I saw you work with Mike Mangino, and I'm trying to get on his radar about a possible job. I was wondering, do you have any suggestions about like ways to reach out to Mike, your boss, or what, you know, whatever, like anything that demonstrates a bit of like research and engagement and so forth is then itself engaging back.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything that demonstrates an attempt at like a genuine connection, right? Like, I'm not a recruiter. And so, but I get messaged all the time simply because I have Heroku in my LinkedIn bio, right? Um, but if that's as far as you went, that doesn't say a lot about what kind of team member you would be, because I mean, job hunting takes a lot of work. So if that's the maximum you're doing for a job, what's the maximum you're doing once you get the job?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Awesome. Well, thanks for bringing your LinkedIn perspective and tips for us this evening. Now we're going to try a little breakout chit chat. So I just wrote a couple, you know me, I got to write some questions. Because I hate the idea of people being in a breakout room just being like, "What's up?" And being awkward. So here's like 3 little starter questions for you. I'm gonna break up. Let me see here. Yep, some relatively small rooms. We'll do like 4-ish people per room, and I want to take this for about 10 minutes. So if you're out there audiencing, I would love if you can, if you're able and comfortable to camera on for a little breakout, that'd be appreciated. And I'm going to bring you back at 6:20. It's going to go faster than you think. Okay, here we go.
Up next, we have Haley talking about neurodiversity in tech. And I actually have Haley's video for us. So let me just get that. Here we go. Let me know for any reason if you can't hear my sound when I start playing this.
Welcome, neurodivergent friendos, advocates, and newcomers to our exploration of neurodiversity in tech. I'm Haley. I'm a software engineer who graduated from Turing in 2021, and I am neurodivergent. I'm here to share insights on neurodiversity within the tech landscape, introduce you to a community I established for us and make you listen to the word neurodiversity about 5,000 times in 5 minutes. Let's go. Last year, I found myself looking for a Slack workspace specifically for neurodivergent individuals in tech. When I had no luck, I created one with a goal of finding like-minded folks who also wanted to network, advocate for inclusion, and empower each other. For folks less familiar with the term, I'll give a little more context about why this is so important. The term neurodiversity originated during the autism rights movement to declare autism as a valid way of being. It was a backlash against organizations such as Autism Speaks, who view autism as a disease to be cured. It is now used as an umbrella term to recognize, embrace, and respect various ways of perceiving and navigating the world. Why is this so relevant to our industry? Over half of tech workers are neurodivergent, but only 3% of employers think that they have a single neurodivergent worker. That's wild. For how prevalent neurodiversity is in the tech industry, the fact that it still remains largely unrecognized and unsupported is a huge problem. Neurodivergent devs have an even tougher time with challenges that affect everyone, such as traditional hiring methods, miscommunications, and complex social networking. If companies do want the best and most dynamic employees, they need to provide the space for all types of brains to thrive on their teams. This is why our community realized our responsibility to contribute positively to lifting up everyone with this often hidden diversity. Our first jump into that was crafting a list of do's and don'ts for hiring managers who wish to emphasize the value of diverse perspectives. We posted a longer list on social media, but I'll just share the first tips commonly echoed in our community. Inclusive hiring tip number 1. Do offer personalized feedback after interviews. Don't send generic rejection messages after personally meeting. 2. Do emphasize portfolio, experience, and references. Don't request passionate essays on mission statements. 3. Do assess interest and engagement through verbal and nonverbal cues. Don't misread fidgeting or lack of eye contact. 4. Do share a list of anticipated interview topics and goals. Don't ask candidates unexpected questions. 5. Do opt for take-home tech challenges. Don't disrupt the problem-solving process with live coding assessments. Our next big project was a similar list of small changes to foster an inclusive work environment that empowers employees. Number 1, do offer remote work for increased productivity and morale. Don't impose office or hybrid schedules. 2, do distribute meeting transcripts. Don't rely on individual note-taking to prevent miscommunications. 3, do specify needs in writing for clarity. Don't expect others to infer all implicit or unstated details. 4, do allow workers to organize and balance their own schedules. Don't micromanage and time police. Last tip, number 5, do encourage public speaking and engagement. Don't compel workers to present or troubleshoot live without notice. In addition to advice for employers, we started publicly spotlighting members, celebrating the contributions that they bring to the industry. But even folks who shy away from the spotlight enjoy our monthly digital happy hours and coffee chats, which are very important to continue the sense of community vibrancy and engagement, offering a space for members to connect, share experiences, and support each other. Whether you're an ally or just want to learn more, you can stay updated with our initiatives on the major social media platforms. And if you're a neurodivergent person in tech yourself, you can join the Slack workspace at nd.io/slack. intech.org. And together, we'll pave the way for a more inclusive future.
Awesome.
Thanks, Haley. Are you okay with some questions, Haley?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So, community building, community starting, I think it's one thing to be like, hey, yeah, I'm kind of like interested, seeing if people are interested in having this conversation. And then there's a like, uh-oh, it worked. Right. Where it feels like kind of the ball starts rolling and people start getting involved and people have their opinions and all those kinds of things. And was just curious, like, can you speak to that experience as the community started like gaining steam? Just what's that been like?
Great question. So I am no stranger to creating communities in real life and online. So I was very prepared for that. And we had some base rules in the beginning, and we're making a bigger code of conduct just to prepare. Fortunately, we haven't had any issues. Everything's been really smooth. It's been great. At first, it was people I invited who were joining, and watching people I didn't know join meant people were inviting others. So it's been great. It hasn't grown so quickly that it became overwhelming. But I
Mhm.
did just bring on 2 folks to help administer with me. So they've been very helpful.
Yeah, I love that. Where do you see, like, if it kind of continues to succeed in growth and connection building and so forth, like, what would success be for you a year from now or 2 years from now?
It's definitely not anything that I would ever want to profit from. It's definitely just a fun community. Um, I think it continuing to grow, continuing to spotlight each other, having more events, having people come to the events, having a more active job board, having people talk more about their experiences. Just the activity and engagement's what I really love about it.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. Kind of hooking back to what Anna was talking about with networking and so forth, like, how do you see the network like benefiting people, on the individual basis? I think the advocacy part makes sense as far as trying to create or help create like better workplaces and hiring practices and so forth. And like person to person, what do you hope to like germinate in that space?
Great question. I'm thinking about the right answer.
Yeah.
So I can talk about my personal side of that more. I mean, accidentally, my network increased hundreds of people in a few weeks. And you have a lot of members as far as the people who are there every day. It's a few dozen of us who are really, really, really engaged. So those folks are becoming really close with each other, and they are supporting each other through the job hunts, connecting on LinkedIn, sharing the talent spotlights. So I think, and we have folks in leadership who are active in our community. So it's definitely nice making those connections, and I hope all the members feel the same.
Yeah. It was just a couple of years ago. I was involved in this stuff, and it was some like very fancy meetings, and the people facilitating the meetings were kind of explaining to me like, we don't know anything about this. Like, we want to learn about it, but really what we have is like a convening power. And ever since then, this phrase, this idea of like a convening power has really stuck with me. I think, in this case, it makes sense that, this is a community you're already a part of and you're calling them together. And I, I think it's easy to underrate, or it's easy to perceive that you have to be some kind of like expert or authority or powerful person to bring people together. Right. And when people talk about like, oh, there's no Python meetup in my town, and it's like, well, what if you made one? Right. Or there's none of this, that this space doesn't exist online. Like, what if you made it? There's a possibility that no one cares and no one comes. And there's a possibility that they do. And when they do, not only is it good for them, but as you imply, Haley, like it's real good for you too. Like you get to be a champion here in this kind of space. And like there's not only can it be like fulfilling, well, it can be a lot of work, coordinating work, but can be fulfilling, can lead to like prospects, friends, you know, jobs, who knows what, all kinds of opportunities.
Absolutely. I've probably put at least 20 hours a week into this for several months now. It does take
That's
a lot of work. But on the previous note of you talking about events for the first happy hour, I was so scared no one would come. And I asked two of my best friends from Turing who are neurodivergent to show up because I was so scared no one would. Like 12 people came for the first one. It was great. But when in doubt, ask your friends to come and hopefully someone else does too.
Love it. Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing with us, Haley. And let's get into spot number 4. What's coming next, Laura? Dan talking about WebAssembly and the whole future of cloud computing in just a couple minutes. I'm into
I'm
it,
on
Dan.
mute.
Yeah,
15, right?
You're
Okay, cool.
you're in now.
Okay, cool. Let me see if I can share my screen here. All right. Cool. Great. Cool. Can everyone see my screen? Can I get a thumbs up? Yeah. Excellent.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, good. Yeah. Okay, cool. So just to change gears just a little bit, this will be a technical talk, but I'll also talk about some projects related to it, and I'll give a little background about myself also. So, yeah, my name's Dan, and Dan Phillips, and this is going to be talking about WebAssembly, otherwise known as WASM, and the future of the cloud computing specifically. So a little bit about me. I'm an engineer at a startup called Loophole Labs, where I mostly focus on WebAssembly. I work on a project and I lead the project actually. It's called the Scale Function Runtime, scale.sh. I'll talk about it a little bit later. It uses WebAssembly to create composable functions that you can run in other apps and by itself. On the internet and on Slack here at Turing, I'm D_Phila. And also, I swear to God, this was not a plant based on what you guys just talked about, but I run the WebAssembly Chicago group. So it's a meetup. It's wasmchicago.org. There was no WASM meetup when I was interested in it a few years ago here in Chicago. And I decided to start it. And it's actually what has led to the work that I do now, the job that I have now, and to like a huge network of people that are colleagues, which is pretty great. Also, some of these slides are recycled, so I'm sorry, but also about me, I went to Turing in 2017. I was in the backend program. I worked as a Rails developer for about 4 years, and then I got into the infrastructure space, doing like Rails infrastructure with containers and Kubernetes, things like that. And now I do more like systems programming, like making infrastructure and dev tools. So moving forward. So what is WebAssembly? I'm going to minimize this so I can see the screen. How many people have heard of WebAssembly? Anybody? People have heard of it. No? No one's heard of it. Maybe? Okay, cool. So even better. So WebAssembly is a specific technology that's relatively new. It started in the browser, and it is the only other thing besides JavaScript that you can run in the browser, right? So there's a runtime for JavaScript, and there's a runtime for WebAssembly, or WASM. And this is right from the spec itself. It's a safe, portable, low-level code format, which is designed for efficient execution and compact representation. So it's a safe sandbox execution environment. It is a deny by default security model. So, and it makes no assumption about languages or host, meaning you can compile many different languages to WASM and then run it in the browser and run it in other places. Sorry, my cat is actually, yeah, sorry. This is my CPO, and she wanted to join quickly. So I was just gonna get her off my track of my chair before she hurts herself. So she doesn't provide as good of feedback as Jesse's CPO. So it's been more just on my own here. So back to the slides. The best analogy to think about WASM is as a virtual CPU, right? And I'll get more into what that means specifically. So it's a compilation target, and this is something that we don't always talk about at Turing unless you're installing things like JavaScript or Ruby, but it's something that you can compile code to, right? Compiled languages like C or C++ or Rust or Java, you compile that to a binary and the machine itself executes that binary. So WebAssembly is like another type of binary. It has its own virtualized instruction set architecture. It uses a bytecode binary format. This is just a detail. I'm not going to get too much into it. And it uses a stack machine sort of model for executing this code. Also a detail that we'll kind of gloss over for now. So what does that mean? In a broad sense, it's just another type of architecture. So like when you want to compile something to run on your Mac versus to run on Linux, you need different architectures and to run on different machines. So in the broad sense, WASM is just another one of those. Key difference is that it's virtualized. It needs a runtime to translate the WebAssembly into machine code, and it's universal, right? And a good place to start, if you're interested, you're thinking about what this actually looks like, is with the MDN docs. So the MDN docs, for me, for JavaScript stuff, was always really, really good. WebAssembly is really well documented here, and you can get started to sort of look at it and use it in a JavaScript context in the browser. Cool. So what does this actually look like? So in the browser, like I said, all major browsers can run JavaScript and WASM, right? We think of this as in terms of the host and the guest, right? So you have the JavaScript, which is like the host, and that will sort of give permission to the guest WASM module to execute certain code that's been compiled to WASM, right? And you'll see we have these two different functions that we like to think of as being exported from each environment. So the JavaScript, when it thinks of the WebAssembly, it only knows about the myModule function because the WASM guest exported it. And the WebAssembly module only knows about console log because the JavaScript function exported it, right? So this is a very sort of basic, high-level architecture of how this works. So what does this mean in practice? In practice, this means you can take any language, theoretically, compile it to WebAssembly, and then run it anywhere where there's a WebAssembly runtime, which makes this kind of interesting because it means you can do stuff like this. You can take any language and you could maybe run it in the front end, the back end, mobile apps, desktop apps, machine learning. All these things are being done now in different ways. And actually, I tweeted this, and it was like Twitter when it was called Twitter. It was like a Twitter highlight for me because Brendan Ike, who's the guy that created JavaScript, actually retweeted it, and so now I actually put that on my resume, and people have noticed that as like a funny thing. So. So yeah, the interesting thing too here is it's a client-side only technology, right? It started in the browser. When we look at the spec again, it says that it's a safe sandbox environment. It makes no assumption about languages or hosts, right? The WebAssembly spec doesn't say that it needs to be run in a browser. It doesn't say anything about the web or browsers. It's got these cold start times, right? So when you start from nothing, like absolutely not running, it can start in microseconds to milliseconds, just a few milliseconds usually. And it's a universal compilation target, right? There's a joke in the WASM community that WASM is neither web nor is it assembly, right? Because of the actual specification just says that it makes no assumption about either of these things. So server-side WebAssembly. This is a thing that I work on mostly in the last few years, and it's something that is sort of the base of the thesis of why I kind of had that over-the-top title of why it will change the cloud forever, possibly. I like to think of it as cloud infrastructure as kind of penicillin moment, right? Penicillin was discovered by accident with some mold growing in a lab, and then they realized they could do all this stuff like kill bacteria and cure diseases. And I kind of think WASM, not to be too grandiose, kind of could follow that same path, right? Not to get too much in the weeds, but when we think about infrastructure, thinking about like Heroku and some of these other platform as a service providers, a lot of things started as using VMs. VMs were a really big thing, so you didn't have to run your code on the bare metal server, maybe in the closet. It was a huge increase. So you could run lots of different, maybe not lots, but several different programs on the same physical hardware. Then we moved to containers, which meant you could use containers to run a lot of different programs in a semi-isolated environment, also on the same hardware. That brought Kubernetes to orchestrate those containers. And then the sort of next natural step might be WASM, where you could do the same thing, even smaller, faster, more secure, and also more universally, right? And for those of us who have heard of Docker, this is a quote. Everyone's still here. Cool. Okay. So this is a quote from Solomon Hykes, who's the guy that created Docker in the late 2000s. If you're in the backend program, or you went through the backend program, or you do server-side programming, you've probably heard of containers, Docker containers. This is what he said about WASM a few years ago. He said that if it had existed in 2008, they wouldn't have needed to create Docker. That's how important it is, because it achieves some of the very similar things that Docker does at a different level of abstraction, right? Which is really interesting. So this kind of made a lot of investors, including the ones that fund the startup that I work for, very excited, but also has sort of like spurred a lot of interest in the area. So cool. Very quickly, my boss would be displeased if I didn't mention the project that I work on. It's an open source project. It's called Scale. Check it out. This is what I was talking about, where you can take programming languages and then use them in other programming languages with relative ease. And you can do this so that when you run code from other languages in your language, you can do this in a safe way, so that those functions, those things that are being written and compiled to WASM, know nothing about the host environment, which could be your framework or your service, your app. A lot of companies have invested in this, like Shopify uses this in their Shopify Functions platform. Shopify is a gigantic Rails app, right? And they actually are a leader in the Ruby community, doing a lot of really great work. And they use WASM with their own functions platform to sort of let users create and run functions safely in their own infrastructure. It also works as a serverless function runtime because of the quick startup speeds, and it's a polyglot programming environment, meaning you can run code from different languages all in the same runtime with very little overhead, right? We did some interesting things here where we took the regex library from Golang and swapped it out with the regex library from Rust, because the regex library in Golang is actually in the standard lib is actually pretty slow. So we swapped it out, compiled it to WASM with a scale function, plugged it in, and then using the Rust compiled to WASM function in Golang, we saw a like 4 to 5 times speed increase over the native Golang code, which was very exciting. And if that doesn't mean much to you, it's totally cool. It's just that for like people who do systems engineering, that kind of speed difference is very important because things like nanoseconds and microseconds matter a lot at that scale. Cool. Yeah, so check that out. And if you have any questions about it, I'd love to talk to you about it. So let's see. How am I doing on time, Jeff? Do I have a couple minutes? Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're good.
Good. Okay, cool. So I just gave a similar talk at a conference last week about this. So I'm going to kind of use the same demo and see how it works. There's a project that I work on. It's called Boxer. It's open source. And so what you can do is you can take a Docker file. You can take a Docker file and you can turn that into a WASM binary. And it also gives you the runtime itself. So this is a work in progress. It's not fully done, and there's a lot of details that go into this. It's beyond the scope of this talk, but I'd be happy to chat with you about it. But I'm going to quickly show you how you can do some Ruby in WebAssembly, right? And what kind of goes along with that. So let's get rid of these. Do some live coding here.
What could go wrong?
Seriously, right? As long as Mike Dow's not watching, I'm not going to get nervous. So.
Yeah, I'm not gonna be sweating bullets. Okay.
All right. Cool. So Boxer, yeah, check this out. So this is a Docker file, right? If people here have seen Docker files, this is a very simple one, right? And I'm sorry if you're in the program now, if you haven't dealt with Docker, you probably will at some point. But basically, Docker gives you like a miniature computer inside what's called a container. and you build that miniature computer with this type of file, which is like a declaration of how to build it, right? This gives you a container image, as we say, right? And with that container image, you can take it, you can run it, and this is what basically all cloud providers use for most of their services, unless you rent just a basic VM. But like a lot of the current cloud is built with containers and things to manage those containers, right? And so this is a Docker file, but we're not going to make a Docker image. We're going to make a WebAssembly binary. And what I'm going to do here is show you how to build it. Okay. So Boxer has this little box CLI that I made. I wrote this in Rust. Please ignore my Rust warnings that I haven't fixed yet. I promise I will do that. You can see here too that the Ruby base image builded, what this did, it took the Ruby runtime, it compiled it to WASM, and then it also bundled the runtime. It bundled the standard libraries, the source code. I built a specific virtualized file system that also bundles this so that it can think that it's on a computer, even though it's in a WebAssembly binary. It's a lot of detail there. I'd love to go into it. And then it did it all. It took the source code, which is here. This source code is from here. And this is the actual source code of the Ruby that I'm going to compile to WASM and do this. It's just like a simple thing that does like a square root and then prints it out. And so that built, it executed it. Cool, cool, cool. Okay, and then we can do a box run, right? And there we have some Ruby on WebAssembly. So what does this mean? This means that this is Ruby that is running in WebAssembly, in a WebAssembly runtime on my computer. So it's not running on the native machine itself, it's running in WASM itself, right? So if I change that, let's do a different example here. Okay. Just do a thing just to show you that it works. I'm going to build this, and all I'm going to do here is do a puts that says hello WASM. Very fun, very nice. Okay, cool. Do a box run. See how this works. And then we get hello WASM. Okay, so that's all good and well. It's running on my machine. It's like, okay, pretty boring. That's like first day of mod 1 doing a put statement, right? So
Sure. It's
so
cool.
great.
It's cool.
It's
I
cool.
wouldn't call it so
Okay.
boring.
All right, thank you, thank you. All right, well, so let's see if we can take this same code that we had, right, which is here. This is the actual binary. I'm not going to spit it out and change it into assembly, but this is the binary that I just made, okay? But now I'm going to, like I said, it's universal, right? So now I'm going to take that WASM, I'm going to attach it to some JavaScript, and I'm going to put it in a browser, okay? And what I'm going to do with that then is I'm going to open up that web page and run the same exact WASM in the web page. Okay, and how this works is a little like some details here, but I can get into it. So what this is then is I have a little proxy server, and now I just have the same exact code executed on this page with this page as the one making the request. So I'll do some more
Can I ask you a live
reloading.
question here, Dan?
100%.
So the compile, what do you call it? The thing you compile, is it like an image? It's a whatever.
It's a binary.
A
It's
binary, sure. Okay,
Yep.
so the binary then, when you're going through this web process, is it running in the browser, or you're currently running it in your web server and outputting to the browser?
So currently the WASM binary is running on this page inside the browser. So this same Ruby code that I just did here on my server, on my machine, is running also with a Ruby runtime and that Ruby code in this browser. And what this is doing is this is responding through a proxy server that I made, as if this is a person going to the website and saying, give me that resource, right? So it's making a GET request, it goes through it, proxies it to some WebSocket thing that I made. But in this page is actually where the code that we would normally run on a server is being run in the browser, right?
In the WebAssembly like execution environment. So I understand what you're saying earlier about like, it's not necessarily web, it's not necessarily assembly, but the execution environment is built into your browser or is available in these browsers, right? And it's like, is it pretty common across modern browsers at this point?
Yep, that's exactly right. So every major browser has a WebAssembly runtime in it. Just
Hmm.
most people don't know about it right now because it's not very widely used, right? So it came out in 2017, and it works alongside. So the only two things that basically every browser can run is JavaScript, like in Chrome, it's the V8 engine, right?
Mhm.
There's also an engine for running WebAssembly in the browser, right? And that's how this is working. And some of the reason that I got into this is because I was interested in this a few years ago, and I was like, why isn't anyone using this? Because it's like, wow, maybe I don't have to write JavaScript ever again. But then I quickly found out that that was not the case. And the reason no one's using it is because the tooling and to use it is extremely primitive. Like you have to do a lot of stuff like passing pointers across these boundaries and then like reading lengths. And the only tooling was in C and C++, right? And so, but just to zoom out just a hair, but I would love to take more questions, Jeff. Just like I'm almost done with this part too. So the interesting thing here is then you can basically run server code in the browser, and you can run that same code on your server, but not just like close to the same code like we've kind of thought about with like Node and JavaScript, the sort of isomorphic JavaScript that was popular a few years ago. Like literally the same binary, the same exact code that is executed if there's a WASM runtime, like there is in every browser. There are also server-side runtimes, which is the one that I was using actually in Rust here in the first example. So this is a lot of information. I just was going to jam this all in 15 minutes. So like the interesting thing here is that what this allows for is like you could take something. This is a project that I made. It's called spinup.dev. And it's like if you've used like Vercel or like Render or like Heroku static pages or stuff like that, or GitHub pages, it's like very similar to that. You like can deploy a website really easy, just like with a click of the button, blah, blah, blah. It also gives you analytics right off the bat, and it can show you like, who's gone from where. But the point is one of the next steps that I'm going to do with this Boxer project is make it so that you can take a WebAssembly binary, which could be your Ruby app, it could be anything, it could be a Python app, it could be a Java app, whatever. You drop it in here, and then it will make the bindings for you so that you can access that code as if you would access it on your machine or on a server. So a lot of like startups like the one that I work at are kind of going in this direction. And it's an interesting one because it's very attractive for cloud providers because, and this is the last technical tidbit here, containers, if you use containers for the same Ruby app that I just showed you, that container image could be 800 to 900 megabytes, right? The startup speeds are a huge problem with containers. If you've ever used like serverless, like the Jamstack stuff, using like AWS Lambda, the cold start times for containers are pretty bad, and they just get worse on a linear scale, right? So 800 milliseconds to 2 seconds if a new request comes in, sometimes more, sometimes 30 seconds, depending on how many dependencies there are. This is really sort of in the weeds here, but like a container uses the same kernel, the same Linux kernel in the underlying host, and it relies on Unix processes, right? The same exact code in WebAssembly, 7 megabytes, 14 megabytes, startup speed in the microsecond range, right? So which is 1,000th of a millisecond. It's like 100 microseconds to maybe 1 millisecond. And the security model is different. Also, a lot of really low-level technical detail, which I'd love to chat with anyone here about, but virtualized, sandboxed, and machine code execution. So this is kind of the sort of like really short thesis why like I think and a lot of other people in this space think that a lot of the cloud execution for cloud native development will move towards WASM. And it's kind of already starting, but we're at the very beginning of this sort of horizon, like the very beginning. So like maybe in the next 5 to 7 years, this will become so commonplace that it'll just kind of be assumed, kind of like containers are today. So cool, thanks. And yeah, appreciate it. I'd love to take questions, and yeah, thank you.
Okay, I have so many questions. I'm not
Yeah.
going to ask them all.
Cool.
And I apologize in advance. Of course, like when we're at the beginning, like all things, I'm like, It's not even going to take that long. We're going to be done here in like 45 minutes, and now it's been like an hour and 25 minutes. I still got questions. So
I'm sorry that I went
I-
over too.
no, you're good. People came for you. They probably didn't come for me. Okay, question one. So I'm thinking about Audrey, and Audrey nurses her dad through developing this app. Well, it would seem to me if they went down this WebAssembly pathway, then for it could offer them, for instance, an easy method for offering a web application that could also be run offline,
Totally.
because you could like binary compile it, run it on the server, click the offline mode, store it in the browser one way or another, or like or whatever. So that seems super interesting. Is that like a space like offline work, or kind of, I don't know if there's a good word for like disrupted connection.
Yeah.
Work.
No, absolutely. Yeah. That's a big thing with I think like some people are calling it like, I don't know, like offline first or whatever. Like
Mm.
and it's like they there's so for example, like Google uses this in like Google Sheets and Google Maps to give you sort of offline stuff. So instead of just caching things in your browser, it also will like do some of the computations involved with that caching using WebAssembly also. And so like that's all happening in the browser. Like the other one of the first companies that kind of did this in a cool way was Figma, which kind of brought Photoshop into the browser. And a lot of that they would do with sort of this offline first idea of like it like basically caching into, I believe, what's called a service worker. A service worker can like intercept requests from the browser. It's like a JavaScript thing. There's a JavaScript API for it, and then like you can like basically run the app as if it's going to a server. It's just that all the code's like running in the service worker.
Like a
Often,
VCR kind of situation.
exactly. Yeah, VCR, like the Ruby testing, same
Mhm.
exact thing. Yeah, same
Hmm.
exact idea. Yep.
And then, okay, I'll try and make this my last question is, especially in the Ruby world, there's always a lot of hand wringing around performance.
Totally.
And just like Ruby code is slow, Ruby can't scale, yada, yada, yada. And I think to a lesser extent, that's also reasonable concerns about things like Python and so forth. They use a similar execution model where you have like the VM and et cetera. I guess I don't understand, you probably know, is like, what would be the like performance impact of, let's say, running native Ruby with some web server or whatever on a machine versus running a similar machine where it's got a compiled WebAssembly? Is it necessary? Like, I could see an argument that it's going to be faster because it's compiled in the WebAssembly world, or it's the exact same because it's replicating the same like VM situation, or it's slower because there's extra layers in there.
Yeah, that's such a good question. So the short answer is that it's almost always the same or slightly slower, right? So the way that people, unfortunately, right now, and this will change, but unfortunately, like so Shopify does this. They let you compile what I just did actually. But what happens is they take the entire Ruby runtime, which is written in C, the C Ruby runtime, they compile that to WASM. And then you take the source code and then you feed that to that C program. Basically, that's compiled to WASM. So you have the Ruby interpreter running in a thing that needs a runtime to execute it and turn it into machine code, right? But the thing with the WASM itself, the compilers, which I don't work on the compilers, but I sometimes go to the meetings. It's like way over my head, right? And like these compilers, though, they do all these crazy optimizations to basically, you can do things like ahead of time compiling, which means that it does like several passes to basically make it usually very close, or maybe one or like 1.2 or 3 times slower than native code, right? And obviously benchmarks are a huge topic, and that can change depending on different examples. But yes, so like what in the WASM spec, basically the idea is that it's native or near native speed. So there is a slight performance hit in some cases. But the interesting thing with Ruby, right, is that like if you're gonna change the performance of certain things in Ruby by like a few hundred microseconds because of the Ruby VM itself and what happens with garbage collection and all this different stuff, you may not actually notice that much right? Like the people who notice a lot and complain about it with WebAssembly are people writing C, like syscalls and like doing like kernel modules and stuff where they're trying to like make sure that the nanoseconds matter, right? And so it's kind of like counterintuitive, in fact, that so like some of the Python and Ruby people like seem to like not notice the difference. For example, this is the last thing I'll say about this is if you've ever used like Jupyter notebooks, for anyone who's done Python data science stuff, you can do Jupyter notebooks in the browser. Those are written in WebAssembly using Python in the browser, just like I showed you with the Ruby example in the browser. And because Python also has a very large runtime and does a lot of stuff with garbage collection and has people complain about speed, especially people who don't work with interpreted languages, like honestly, like the fact that you can run it in the browser, people kind of just ignore any tiny speed differences. Has been what I've noticed. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Dan. Sounds, I know some folks might be like, hey, Dan, what the hell were you talking about?
I'm sorry about
And
that.
uh
I'd love to talk more about it if anyone wants to talk, of course.
it's no, but I mean, it's also, I think it's like good for all of us to remember, like there's still a lot of computer science go on out there, right? And like it's not all idea boxes and so forth. Like some
Totally.
pretty interesting spaces to get into.
I'll just say one last thing too. If a lot of this stuff that I got into, like I do mostly systems level stuff now, and but I don't have a computer science background. Like I was a teacher before I went to Turing, so I was like an English teacher, and so like a lot of this stuff, if people get afraid, like I was like when I first saw like a pointer and had to read like C header files and stuff, like you can learn it all, you know, and it's definitely something that's doable. Like I also wasn't, you know, in like I repeated mod 2, like I struggled at Turing also. It was a lot of challenging things for me. But systems level stuff for me has really clicked. I really love it. And you know, I did web stuff and then I did infrastructure stuff. And my point is just don't be afraid. Like you can obviously do it too. And if you want to chat more with me about it, I'd feel free to hit me up on Slack or whatever. So
Awesome. Well, thank you, Dan.
thanks.
And I think we're gonna close up with a surprise comeback, a like not ready but then ready. Is that right, Rory?
Yeah, that's correct. I
Okay.
actually just finished putting the work in like a minute before the meeting and everything. So it was
Like
literally the last minute.
any software developer, Rory has encountered the joy of a live demo when everything breaks, and then you have to try and fix it. And so I'm gonna hand it over to you, Rory. Let's find out. We'll be cheering
Sure.
for you.
Yeah, super excited. This is actually a really good segue because the project itself actually relies on WebAssembly to work. It's actually not coded in JavaScript. So this was
Nice.
really good. Dan did this incredible introduction for me. But yeah, all right, let me share my screen. Okay. Okay, cool. So, my name's Rory. I'm originally from FE 2111, so I was in Turing about 2 years ago. And way back when in Mod 3, I made a project which I called MyZM. I'll just quickly bring it up to show you what it is. It's just going to take a second here. I'm loading it in the other window. Okay, and can everybody see this? Right.
Yep.
So it's a very basic app. I mean, this was the app that I used to pass Mod 3, and it's a CRUD app where you can search a database for images. The idea behind the project was that I wanted to create an online museum, but since I was only in Mod 3 at the time and I was still learning, I still had a lot to learn before I could actually make it really cool. And so it looks nice. You know, you have this like user interface where you have a canvas and then images will eventually show up. I'm not sure why the API hasn't returned anything yet. No. But this is a lot less important than the actual project. So I will actually
We'll use
launch.
our imagination.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I decided I wanted to reboot this project because I thought there was actually a real cool concept there to have an online museum. And so I started coding in Godot. And let me get this up in the other window. Oh yeah, the API finally came back. Um, okay, yeah. So you'll notice in this other window here, it looks like the same project, but you'll also notice at the very, very bottom, there's this additional option where you can enter the viewport. So when you click this, it spawns you in the world, and now you can just walk around in it, and you actually are in the museum itself.
It's giving me
Yeah.
like Quake vibes of art.
Exactly, yeah. Some of the stuff is basic sprites right now, so I will be working on that, but I need to learn how to use Blender, which is another open source software for making the 3D graphics a little bit better. But the idea behind this page is that I want to make something that can be viewed as a traditional website where you navigate through the page by clicking on different things. But then I also want to have the alternative of being able to like enter the virtual world and actually interact with it. And as a shout out here, Audacity is the name of the company that I have started as like a side project. I'm hoping to do more with this type of thing. But yeah, I mean, that's basically it. Within this virtual world, I'm trying to make things interactable. So I guess if you go to this inspiration page here, the design behind it, it was based on the African American Smithsonian. So if I go back to the gallery, like this is the actual museum on the outside, this is the building. Um, and then I wanted the like almost gameplay mechanics of it to work like an MC Escher world where you can move things around. So I'll show that as well. If you go back to the game world, um, you can go over to this center area, and then with these controls, which I haven't coded in the UI yet, you can actually flip the building around so that you can like walk on the walls and everything, or like flip it over. I also eventually want to make it so that this whole thing can move around like a puzzle box, like almost like a Rubik's cube. And that way, you can make it even more chaotic in how you orient the building. And in a way, like you're making your own work of art by like twisting the building around. Um, I still have a long way to go on this. I actually want to eventually put my actual artwork on here. I have a lot of art, like you probably see it in the back of the room. There's like a whole pile of art over there. Eventually I want to put it in this website so that like literally all of the work that I do outside of work will just be combined into one. Like I'll have my computer science projects on here as well as like the art pieces that I make. But yeah, so that's the project. I'm hoping to do cool stuff with this in the next couple months as I develop this more and more.
I love it. Where does the WebAssembly come into it?
Yeah, so in order to deploy this on a website, I have to use WebAssembly because the virtual world has to be coded in this thing called Godot script, which is for the game engine itself.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I haven't done anything with that yet. I will have to learn stuff about WebAssembly eventually. So I don't know, maybe I'll get really passionate about that. But yeah, it is interesting.
Awesome. Well, good luck with it. I appreciate how it's like completely absurd, right? In that like artistic spirit of like, oh, let's just turn the building upside down. Like, yeah, okay, cool. It makes sense to me. And I think it's also amazing, right? Like in your day-to-day work has been like on the QA side, is that right?
It has, yeah.
Yeah. And then alongside doing full-time QA work, you're like, let me figure out how to make a 3D museum I could walk through.
Yeah, well, if I'm gonna do a project outside of work, it takes a lot of motivation. So I figure like the project has to be cool enough to justify doing it. I would actually like to get out of QA and do other stuff. So, I'm looking for my next web developer role and I'm hoping to make that change. But in the meantime, I'm working on this and this has been great for keeping me motivated with learning.
Awesome. Well, keep going with it and hope it stays interesting and fun and keeps working. I think it's amazing with any side project, whether you're talking about a app to learn math or to browse art, like I think the most important thing is to get something that does something.
Mhm.
And then once it does something, it's like much easier to stay engaged with it. Right. And like make improvement and improvement. And all the time leading up to it when it does nothing is like such a hard slog, like in the dark. And then once it feels like it kind of like ships, it exists, then you can be like, oh, let me tweak this, let me try this, let's do that. So thanks, Roy, for presenting, and shout out to all of our presenters tonight. And thanks to all of you for attending, and Laura for organizing. And we'll try it again in a couple weeks. We'll share the recording out from this evening. And yeah, happy to get your feedback if you want to message me or message Laura. And otherwise, it's really like always lovely to see y'all and see some of your real life going on here in the background, and also just folks I haven't seen in months or years. So thanks for getting together, and we'll do it again soon. Have a good night, y'all.